The Echelon Racing League season number 3 heads to Silver City, New Mexico today for the first of 3 virtual stops in the Echelon Racing League's presentation of the virtual tour of the Gila, one of our favorite races all year and one of the great American road races that makes up American bike racing. Pretty much every big name of American stage racing, American road racing has made a stop in Silver City, New Mexico, and this year, we'll crown our 3rd class of virtual participants in the virtual tour of the Gila. Brad Soner alongside Ellen Noble as we get ready to kick off 3 days of racing today, starting with the time trial today, followed by the Mogollon on Saturday, and then the legendary Gila Monster Stage, the big road race coming up on Sunday, the final day of the 3-day virtual tour of the Gila. Oh, there they are, the riders in the grid getting ready to go. We're going to start with our men's session today, followed by our elite women a little bit later this evening. 2 sessions on the docket today. We had an earlier session to accommodate the European crowd, and then the evening session for our Americans, our West Coasters and East Coasters, all racing in this second block of the day here. One of the great parts about the tour of the Gila is the great people down in Silver City, New Mexico, including our race director, Jack Brennan, who had some special words for our competitors before starting the virtual tour of the Gila.
Good afternoon. This is Jack Brennan. I'm the race director for the In Real Life Tour of the Gila. Welcome to the first day of the virtual tour of the Gila. Today is our time trial course out in Tyrone, New Mexico. It's 16.15 miles long. Initial climb out of Tyrone. That's our start location, Tyrone, New Mexico. So we start a climb up to a pass we call Tyrone Pass. And then it's undulating for the next couple of miles to our turnaround. And then you flip it and come right back, another 8 miles back to Tyrone. The beauty of this course is the climb up the Tyrone Pass. About 3 or 4 miles climb. You get yourself warmed up, nice descent past the Tyrone Mine. Flip it, come back, climb up to that path again, and then it's this pedal to the metal back home. You're dropping like a rock. You're in your top gear, and you just try to hold on to get back to the finish line.
Oh, the long downhill run into Silver City, maybe the most legendary part of this time trial course, and out and back with basically 2 ups and 2 downs on this course profile. It's only about 16 miles, but it's going to feel like a whole lot worse with this elevation gain. Racing just sort of northwest of Silver City, New Mexico. You can see sort of down in the southwest corner of New Mexico. We start just outside of town, heading out to the turnaround, and then work your way back. Ellen, I want to ask you about these out and back time trials. Never seems to be the same on the way back as it was on the way out, does it? All right, we're going to get Ellen in here just a second there. You see your course profile right over 16 miles of racing. Elevation gain just over 1,300 feet out there today with the max gradient of just 7%. That'll be on the way up. You'll see these 2 right here. You see the long climb out of Silver City before they drop down, then that short kick back up on the way back before the long descent on the way back down. So it'll be very interesting to watch this first climb, the first climb of the day, because pretty much starts going up as soon as they leave the starting house, and then that descent on the way back down is downhill, downhill, and down here. You heard Jack Brennan talking about the importance of being in the maximum gearing, the biggest gear on the way back. We'll see how many riders max out their biggest gear. Jackie Godby on that big time trial bike may be at an advantage heading into this one, but we'll have to wait and see. Equipment selection going to be a big one out there today. Here are your series standings coming into this stop of the Echelon Racing League. Mason Roca on the top of the leaderboard, just ahead of Brian Kellison in second. Roca holding on to a 55-point lead at the top of this one, with Brian Hodges sitting in third. Ray Wilson, your first international rider, in fourth, with the Canadian Lucas Verslee sitting in sixth place, followed by Saad Kerdan. We saw a good ride from the No Pins R3R rider the last couple weeks, with Neil Ostenfeld in eighth, and then Kristen Klevgard rounding out your top 10 for the X Speed United team at 234 points. Now, things are going to change this weekend because of the stage race points, so a lot of points on the line for this one. As we said earlier, there was an earlier session of time trial racing to accommodate some international riders. Obviously, the European riders on European time would have little trouble staying awake for this evening session, so we gave them a chance to race earlier this afternoon, and I think that'll be a nice addition, nice advantage for those riders. Obviously, racing at just the right time can pretty majorly affect the way that you race, so see a lot of the European riders taking advantage of this one earlier in the day. So winning times here right around 37 minutes, a little under 37. That'll be sort of our mark to keep an eye on. Winning time last year was set by Kevin Bouchard Hall in our elite men. He did a 37:10, so they have already gone past the fastest time of last year, breaking the 37-minute barrier. All right, picking up our first riders out on course. We're going to be popping around out there, as we do have an individual time trial setup out there today, so we'll try and follow these riders around one by one. Taking a look at McCarroll. Looks like Bouchard Hall going to be out there very soon. And the other thing we're going to be watching today is the wattage here at just under 400 watts right now. McCarroll's going to have a pretty good idea of where he wants to be kind of pegged in, sort of tacked in. And looks like Bouchard Hall going to do just a little higher wattage behind him. There's a look at McCarroll in his pain cave. Keeping it steady, looking comfortable. All right, so McCarroll already passed by his, what is a 15-second interval rider out there. Riders starting every 15 seconds out of the grid, so that explains why you saw Bouchard Hall making the catch so quickly on McCarroll coming out of the grid. Back to Kevin Bouchard Hall, last year's winner on this Tyrone ITT course. Bouchard Hall looking to best his 37:10 virtual time set last year. Seen a lot of riders break that 37-minute mark in real life. Course record, a 33:27 set by Project Echelon's George Simpson back in 2022 at the In Real Life event. He ended up third at the Pro Time Trial National Championships that year. So speaks to the strength that it takes to do well on this course.
That's interesting.
Sounds like we've got Ellen starting to make her way in. Ellen,
because this can.
Can I look at your output?
But it selected the output as well.
I think we got it right now.
I can hear you now. Yep.
All right, perfect. Ellen, thanks for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties on our end earlier today. Watching Kevin Bouchard Hall, last year's winner, in deep time trial mode right now. This guy trying to break his 37:10. I know you've been here before. The long 37-minute effort that's pretty much just going as hard as you can. It is, for some people, one of the worst, and for some people, one of the best parts of bike racing.
Yeah, Brad, I definitely fall into the worst category. Time trials, always my least favorite, definitely not an effort that suited me. So I have a ton of admiration for our riders out there like Kevin Bouchard Hall today, who are able to have just so much consistent power out there.
As if a time trial wasn't bad enough, doing it on a trainer, if you don't have the suffer gene that it takes to do well in a time trial, doing it on a trainer makes it about 100 times worse. So Bouchard Hall out there obviously has that natural ability to suffer. If you can sit in the basement like this and turn out wattage like this for this long, this guy's doing 550 watts pretty consistently out there, which for a lot of riders, they could only dream of doing those power numbers for the better part of 37 minutes out there. Put that into perspective, if you would, Ellen. Sort of talk about how we measure power and why that number in the upper left corner, looking at the wattage that they're producing, why that's so important, but why you shouldn't measure yourself against Kevin Bouchard Hall's power numbers, because they're going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So power is sort of the universal measurement of, the wattage, so how hard you are pushing down on the pedals. And so it's kind of the big equalizer, but it can be really easy to get caught up in the numbers. And the reason that you can't compare your power to that of Kevin Bouchard Hall's or really anyone else's is because we all weigh different amounts. So if someone weighs twice as much as you, they're going to be able to automatically put down so much more power on the pedals. So that's why if you look beneath on the left in the middle of the screen, we have a number that says WPKG. So that's going to be watts per kilogram. So that's kind of the really best way to be able to compare to someone else. So that's saying that the amount of power that you're putting down compared to your body weight. So that's kind of the best way to be able to compare the apples to oranges, if you will.
We'll keep those riders ranked on the left-hand side. We're also, when we look at the road races and stage races, we're always looking at the efficient riders, especially on RGT. It's often the rider that has a lower watt per kilo that'll still win the bike race. Not really the case today. There's not a whole lot of drafting to be had in the time trial. There is some, energy savings to be had, and where you use your energy on the downhill sections, things like that, that could make it a little more efficient for you out there. But for the most part, I would think most of these riders will have a pretty similar watt per kilo when we look at the top 10 or top 5 finishers today.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a little bit of room for strategy out here in terms of pacing, but you have to imagine that the riders that we're looking at right now are going to be experienced enough that most of them are going to be pacing pretty comparably. So yeah, for the most part, it's really going to come down to absolute pure wattage and power.
See Neil Ostenfeld here from the Next eSport, presented by Insured Team. This is a guy who's been with us for the better part of the 3 seasons of the Echelon Racing League, so he knows these courses well. He knows how to ride on RGT, but you see even him doing these sort of short, powerful efforts, had to get out of the saddle there very quickly. Some of that will be because of the elevation gain on this course. If you have a little kicker or something like that, you'll need to have that little short burst of power. So Ostenfeld looking pretty experienced. He's got the fan blowing his hair around, got to stay cool, and I think I saw him opening the window before the start too. I hope he's got some cold air coming in. He must be on the downhill section right now. You will max out the gearing. Very realistic on RGT. They'll slow you down going into corners, and then they also do max out your sort of realistic max speed. You're not going to go 80 miles an hour on a bike, and same story in the game. No matter how steep that road is, every human has their limit of how fast they're going to go on the way down. So there are some points, Ellen, on this course where it doesn't do you any good to pedal. You're going so fast, you'd have to turn such a fast RPM that you're better off just coasting.
Definitely, and you have to take those opportunities, especially in something like a time trial, where you're able to just take that little bit of rest. And that's going to be kind of the thing that separates all of these riders that are so equally matched in terms of watts per kilo. That specific strategy and pacing is really where we're going to see one rider separate from the next.
Back over to Bouchard Hall. Bouchard Hall not only looking for a good result here in the Echelon Racing League, this rider recently named to the U.S. ESports World Championship team. He's going to be heading back representing the U.S. at the Worlds this year, something I never thought I would say 3 years ago, that we were fielding a team for the ESports World Championships, but this guy has emerged as one of the best. This will be his 3rd year in a row representing the U.S. at the esports worlds, or I guess I should say in the esports worlds. They don't even travel to the esports world championships.
No, I think that COVID and lockdown really has done wonders for the success of virtual racing. Obviously, it existed before lockdown, but once we all started spending a lot more time exclusively at home, I think that this became an even more viable option for people. And to see, a lot of professionals out here, a lot of highly educated riders out here with very intense jobs, having this virtual racing where you don't have to travel is a massive advantage to this type of racing.
I see Scott Gleason here taking a little rest on a visible downhill section on the course here. See his little power profile in the upper left corner of the gameplay window. You see that's completely dropped out there, that little valley where he was able to zero it out. That is a huge energy savings. I know the coaches always, when they look at power files, a lot of times they're looking for how many times you could zero that out. It's not about going as hard as you can. It's about saving as much energy as you can. And if he was able to sort of use the course feature, course profile to his advantage there to save some energy, that'll be well served for Gleason here.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brad. It's about so much more than really just going as hard as you can, because if everyone were just trying to go as hard as they can, they would be able to completely wipe themselves out in 5 minutes. So it's really taking the energy that you do have available and, making it last throughout the entire stage today and then through the 2 subsequent stages tomorrow as well.
Back up to Chris Naven. Now, Naven gets some credit for sort of getting Jackie Godby into the virtual racing world. I guess credit or jeers, depending on whether you're a Jackie Godby competitor or watching Godby dominate races like this. Naven with that Triple X Racing Club sort of saw the potential in Jackie Godby, the triathlete, and said, you got to try some virtual racing. He's got the workout written out on the whiteboard here. He's got the Is that say metaverse warm up? Is he warming up in the metaverse?
It looks like metabolic warm up, perhaps.
Oh,
So maybe
metabolic
that's
warm
another
up.
word
See,
for
that's
a little
why
bit of
you're here, Ellen,
endurance.
because I don't know what metabolic is. So that's why I went to metaverse.
2 to 3x VO2, 15 seconds maybe, 5 to 10 minutes EZ, 100 watts, and then fuel up, 3, 2, 1 taper.
I think a lot of people don't realize how deep riders are going. This is so common to see these workouts written, or you'll see a lot of times they'll put a piece of tape on the stem or the top tube of the bike that'll have just really simple markers of on the course. And it always shocked me, like, you can't remember that there's a sprint at 32 miles in. There's only 2 sprints. How hard can it be to remember? But when you're going that deep, you absolutely cannot remember that.
Yeah, it was always fun racing professionally on the road, getting back to the team car after a big day and comparing notes with my teammates. And they would say something like, oh, did you see this thing or that thing out on course? And everyone would be like, what are you talking about? None of us noticed that. And they were like, how did you not notice, this spaceship flying next to us, or, something insane? And truthfully, sometimes you're just so in the zone that you wouldn't notice if the road disappeared in front of you.
Tim Rugg out on course right now. Rugg had some good power rides earlier in the series here, so we'll be looking for a good time from him. Meanwhile, back to Jamie Furman, another XXX Racing Athletico rider. This is sort of the dominant Chicagoland program. We've seen some really strong riders come out of XXX Racing. I know they have a big presence in cross, too. They're a big part of that Chicago Cross Cup. But plenty of roadies as well. And it sounds like they get people on all kinds of bikes, including Jackie Godby off the triathlon bike and onto the trainer, although still riding the TT bike. I guess old habits die hard. Godby has been on that TT bike every time. I guess you ride what you're most comfortable with.
Definitely, and if you're one of those riders who can put down power in that position, it's a great, powerful position to be in. Some riders not really able to put down as much power in that sort of time trial aero position, but if you have the physiology for it, like Jackie Godby, then I think that's going to be a little bit of an advantage, actually, especially with a lot less dynamic movement happening on the trainer. You don't have to get out of the saddle, and so having that time trial position with that time trial saddle is probably a little bit more comfortable if it suits you.
I know riders spend so much time on the fit of their bike, and once you get it right, it's like a good pair of shoes. You don't want to mess with it. You want to stick with it. So I think that would make sense for Godby to stay on her triathlon bike, and then obviously take that outside as well. Here's some early splits from the turnaround point, halfway point. Kevin Bouchard-Hall with the fastest split of the day, 19:16 intermediate split. Ian McCarroll was second through at 19:58, so Bouchard-Hall is crushing this one out there right now. Cooper did a 20:51 at the turnaround. Wader did a 21:26, and Ostenfeld with a 21:57. So these guys pretty well on track for pretty close to what they did last year at 37:10. We do expect the back to be a little faster than the out, save a little bit in the tank.
That's definitely a considerable gap from Kevin Bouchard-Hall. Time trials, typically you don't always see massive gaps in a time trial race. So to have 45 seconds, I think, at the turnaround point should be a little bit of a feather in Kevin Bouchard-Hall's cap.
Bouchard-Hall doing well here speaks so much to the variety of strength that he has. He's been able to win at a field sprints. He's been able to win long road races, but typically a time trial is such a vastly different discipline that we don't see riders winning all three. You don't see someone that can sprint, that can win a long road race, and can win a time trial. You're sort of, it's like pick two. You're maybe one. But this guy has really been a great all-rounder here in the virtual world. He can time trial, he can sprint out of a big group, and he can do these long endurance stages too, like we're going to have later on this weekend. Watch approaching Mulligan now, just heading out with 14 kilometers of racing left on a nice 4% downhill gradient for Bouchard Hall now. You can see the upper right-hand corner. It does show the current slope or gradient. He's just under a 5% dip on the way down right now. So enjoying a little rest, and you can see that is somewhat reflected in his wattage, dropping that down to just over 400, which, dare I say, is an easy wattage, easier than Kevin Bouchard Hall was doing earlier.
Looks like he might have heard you, Brad, as he's back on the pedals now, starting to approach 500 watt territory, which, you know, we've talked a little bit already about the sort of incomparable nature of wattage, but I've just, based on our live stream today, a little bit of an idea of what Kevin Bouchard Hall looks like, and that is some very, very impressive wattage for a rider of his size. If he was Andre the Giant, maybe 500 watts would not be too substantial, but 500 watts is sort of the holy grail for pretty much all bike racers.
Yeah, unless you are to the point where you are getting a custom bike, 500 watts would be enough to get you moving pretty quickly out there. So Bouchard Hall was sticking at it for a good portion of that today. You can see the power zone that they're in, the Ceres power zone meters in the upper left corner, showing the sort of color-coded power zones as well. Now that's going to be individual for each rider as well. The game tracks each rider's sort of minimum and maximum effort. They develop a profile, if you will, of what their maximum would be, because like when I get into 200 watts, I'm in the red pain capacity zone. It takes Bouchard Hall up to 500 or 600 watts before he gets there. So it's different for everyone.
It's also completely different depending on the time of year or even just over the course of a couple months. It's so easy to get out of shape or get into shape so quickly. It always feels like it goes away a lot easier than it's earned, but 200 watts all of a sudden feels very hard for me.
I can only imagine how easy it is to slack off during the holiday period as well for these riders to be able to stick at it in the basement, on the trainer. Most people are already putting off projects at work. They're trying to push that to January 1st. You can't do that with training. You got to stay on it. And all the more impressive for these riders making this stop of the Echelon Racing League right smack dab in the middle of the holidays. I guess a good way to burn off some of those extra holiday calories, but just making it here to the start line, setting the time aside for 3 consecutive days of racing at Tour of the Gila. Very impressive for these riders.
It is. It's so impressive, and I think a lot of these riders do have to have some sort of reward for themselves in order to make this feel a little bit more enticing. I think staring down the bike in the basement or in the pain cave, wherever that may be, doesn't always feel super exciting. Crawling on the bike at 6 p.m. Eastern time maybe feels like the last thing that you want to do after a long day at work, but I think these riders sort of create their own reward system. I know I was looking at Jackie Godby's Instagram just before I got on here. She talks a lot about chocolate, so I think each rider sort of has their effort and then their reward afterwards to make it feel a little bit more enticing.
Looking at second place, Ian McCarroll on your screen right now, trying to catch that second split for Kevin Bouchard Hall. Some riders will have a better second half of this time trial, significantly better than other riders. You're either sort of a first half rider or a second half rider. I think Bouchard Hall is a second half rider, but if McCarroll has an even better second half, he can make it back from this deficit. 40 seconds would be a lot to make up in the second split of a just under 40-minute time trial, but it's possible. Crazier things have happened. Just like in real life, we have the inevitable threat of a flat tire, broken chain, maybe out in Silver City, some wildlife coming out in front of you. All kinds of crazy things could happen. All you have to worry about in the virtual world is your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and computer and trainer all staying powered up and hooked up. It's a different type of racing, I guess.
I think I'd rather take the chance on the wildlife. It feels a lot more predictable than banking on your Wi-Fi and technology staying connected.
I think that says something about the reliability of a Wi-Fi. When you trust a mule deer in a field, is more reliable than Wi-Fi sometimes.
Yes.
Up to Kevin Bouchard-Hall, who has been staying pretty steady. You see this power profile in the upper left corner. For some riders, it looks like a whole bunch of up and down. You'll see, we're into work mode now for Bouchard-Hall. The jersey is off, the hat is off, it's on.
It's definitely on, which sort of calls into question what was going on before when he established his 40-second advantage. Was it not on then, and he's only just about to really come out of the woodwork?
I mean, this looks like a different rider than the last time we saw Bouchard-Hall. He looked like he was out for a Friday evening cruise, but he must be on the way back now because Bouchard-Hall is dripping in sweat now into his last 6 kilometers of racing.
Yeah, and like you were pointing out, Brad, looking at his power profile from this ride, that sort of heartbeat line in the top left corner. So that's going to show just how steady his power is. It's really hard to compare if you don't have a point of reference to know just how impressive that is, but that is not what everyone's power profile looks like. A lot of riders, myself included, will have major surges. It looks just like a heartbeat, when you're in the hospital, and yeah, they're not usually this flatlined, so you can really see just how steady and how smooth Kevin Bouchard-Hall is in this type of time trial effort.
Well, he's not going to be out there much longer. Bouchard-Hall at right around 5.5K to go. Back to John Cooper, 3rd place at the intermediate split. Almost a full watt per kilo lower on the average than Bouchard-Hall. This one much steadier though, so maybe a tortoise in the hare situation here, although Bouchard-Hall not much left for him up front here. Cooper doing a good job keeping it steady. That's exactly what you want your power profile to look like. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It's hard not being able to see you. This is so steady. It's just hard to really make sense of how steady this power profile is. And Brad, I think you can agree with me here. It would be really nice to be able to ride like that for even just one day, just to know what that felt like.
I think there'd be a lot more people that would come back to the group rides with me if I could ride like that. For some reason, no one ever wants to ride on my wheel. Probably because my power profile looks like an EKG.
Speaking of EKG, John Cooper in 3rd place, another rider I was looking at on Instagram before today started, and his Instagram bio says an MD PhD, which, like me, if you do not know what that means, it means that he got a double doctorate. He said, I don't expect you to call me doctor, but that means that he has his MD and his PhD, as does Jacqueline Godby. So those two, not just great at bike racing, but also very great at being smart and going to school.
We talked about Jackie Godby's PhD dissertation last week. John Cooper studying fibrotic scarring after spinal cord injury. Thank God there are smart people like Jackie and John out there.
Yes, I will second that sentiment.
Back up to Bouchard-Hall, just under 3.5K to go.
Looks like he may have heard us talking about his power profile. It's looking even smoother now than it was before.
Ellen, I'm going to read you John Cooper's most recent published article, if you don't mind. I think we can all learn a little bit more. His last published article was addressing chest radiograph at admission predicting early intubation among COVID-19 inpatients. But I was more interested in the intravenous immune-modifying nanoparticles as a therapy for spinal cord injury in mice. I made it 2 paragraphs in that one before I was completely lost. It was something about copyright and the author.
Yeah, I was going to say I may have better luck trying to read a book in French than I would trying to read that published article. But like you said, Brad, thank God there are smart people in the world who are able to appreciate all of these incredible findings.
Nanoparticles. All right, Cooper at just over 5K, Bouchard Hall at just over 2K. So he's going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. Remember, 37:10, his winning time last year. You can see his running time in the upper right corner of the screen at just under 35 right now, 34:42 for Bouchard Hall up at the front here. So it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be real close to that 37:10 winning time on last year's virtual tour of the Gila. This is a guy who last year had to weight his trainer down with 2 bags of cement mix. He had dropped those at the base of the trainer. Apparently, some people are so strong that they can lift a trainer off of the ground when they're putting out maximum wattage. Again, not a problem that I've had.
That is pretty impressive, as the kids call it, strong flex.
Bouchard Hall head down, coming into his last kilometer. Downhill run into a flat finish. So just the last K is flat. You do bring a little bit of momentum in as you see him go under the Flamme Rouge out there. You see that profile showing just that little kick up to the finish here. 800 meters for Bouchard Hall. Looking like he is questioning some serious decisions on that trainer right now. Wondering what brought him to this point. The pursuit of glory at the Echelon Racing League, my friend.
Kevin Bouchard Hall thinking, it's a Friday night. I could be doing anything, and I'm choosing to put myself into the pain cave.
I hope this guy's got a towel on the bars. I can only imagine what his handlebar tape budget is like when it gets into virtual season here. He is going to crush his time from last year. He will beat that 37:10. By how much remains to be seen. Last 210 meters for Bouchard Hall here. And he'll stop this one well under 37. Unofficially, Bouchard Hall going to go 36. We'll call it 49 on the clock for him. Improved on last year from a 37:10. Down to a 36:49. Nicely done for Kevin Bouchard Hall.
That's going to be a hard time to beat. And it looks like it was not done easily. You can really see that effort.
Cue the puking in 3, 2, and we're going to go off camera for that. Back to McCarroll, had the second fastest split out there today. Guy's going to have a chance to at least make it onto the podium alongside Kevin Bouchard Hall here. You can see he's already gone past that 37:10 time, but he's trying to keep it under 38.5, maybe, somewhere around there today. So McCarroll into the final sprint. Break down the pain cave here, Ellen. He's got the workbench over the right shoulder, the water heaters over the left shoulder, and then the sink to wring out that sweaty kit right behind him.
Nice thing about basements is no one has any complaints about how cold you keep it, so you can get those windows open, you can get the fans blasting, and then still crawl into a warm bed later on that night.
we learned last year with Garrett Peltonen, who is an exercise physiologist down at Western New Mexico University in Silver City, talking about the optimum temperature for your body to train. He said it was something like 56 degrees was the best sort of, optimum core external temperature to be riding at. So the basement, you figure 65, somewhere around there, so it could even be a little cooler for optimum temperature. Seen a lot of riders embracing outside. I guess it can get too cold at some point. Once it gets down to like 0 degrees, that's can't be good for you.
Yeah, I used to find myself doing a lot of my trainer workouts closer and closer to the outdoors, sometimes even making it onto a patio or a porch. So would not be surprised to see a couple of riders trying that today, but I guess it would be hard to bring that virtual setup a little bit with the computer and the video camera and everything with them.
As we learned at the Cyclocross National Championships just a few weeks ago, the optimum temperature is not 12 degrees Fahrenheit for riding or commentating. So there's a sweet spot in there somewhere, I think, between too hot and too cold.
I think it's a pretty generous sweet spot as well. It's not really on the knife's edge.
Now you see Cooper finishing up his ride from the Godby Cooper Pain Cave. We'll see Jackie Godby on that very setup just after this. See those jerseys flapping in the background. Now, that is coming from an external fan. These aren't like the old trainers that would have a fan on them, the old wind trainers that generate, it sounds like a jet engine taking off. The trainers today are a little quieter, and it's really just electronics in the back. So that wind you see is coming from a fan. They do that obviously to stay cool. But if you haven't checked out the new trainer technology just in the last, I would say, like 10 years. I think there's probably a lot of people that have a 10-year-old trainer. It's come a long way, I'll tell you that. Cooper wrapping up, a little fist bump at his finish. And this may be the most painful part of a time trial, and is not when you're in the peak of riding, but it seems like as soon as you stop is when the pain really hits you.
Oh my gosh, yes, where all you want to do is just be able to stop and curl up into a little ball, but you have to keep those legs moving or else it's going to feel even worse when it's all said and done. But it really takes a lot of strength and will to keep those pedals turning for a little bit into that cool down.
Back to Neil Ostenfeld up next. This will be our third men's finisher. Inside his final kilometer of racing, going to go right around 43, 42 and a half maybe for Ostenfeld. A good, not great time for him. Ostenfeld has had some podium results here in the Echelon Racing League. That Next ESports, presented by Insured Team. They were one of the first teams with virtual specific clothing. They had these singlets when people were still riding, back before the first printed base layers became popular. They were the first to have these sort of esports specific uniforms for their riders. I thought that was cool.
I like that. It's very practical as well to recognize that your athletes are not going to be riding in a jersey, at least not for very long, on the trainer. So having something that's a little bit more designed with the sport in mind is very clever.
I'm sure we'll continue to see virtual innovations, all the little pockets and things that you need specific to virtual riding. Ostenfeld wiping the sweat off after his ride. And it looks like Chris Wader also finishing up just behind him, 42.05. That's a good time for Wader. And here's a good finish, 39.08 for Matt Zimmer. He'll be one of the few to go sub 40 today in that group. And then we'll see Mulligan next in at, should be right around 42 minutes. For his 16-mile ride. I think he's getting steamy in Mulligan's training room here. a fine haze of hard work coating every surface of the room.
Just a few hundred meters left for Mulligan. Today coming in just around 41 minutes.
I'm watching where he's looking on the screen. This is sort of a unique view. A lot of times we don't get to see this up close with the riders. He's got that screen right up on him. But you can see him looking at the different sides of the screen. I think he's looking at the power and then kind of trying to look away. Some riders prefer not to see the screen. Oftentimes they'll change their view on the game. The riders have a few different options for the view. Some riders will take what's called the GUI, the graphical user interface, completely off. They don't want to see any of those stats. They ride on feel, which takes some confidence, I guess, but if you know what 500 watts feels like, you know what 500 watts feels like. And some riders just don't like staring at those numbers the entire time. So they'll completely take those off or try to look away. Some riders will stare at it the entire time. It's like, you know, they're robots staring at the screen, but if that's what you need to regulate the power, that's what you need.
Yeah, there's so much personal preference that comes into it. I was one of those riders who would psych myself out so much depending on my wattage, so I really needed to have those numbers taped over. I would not have done well with that user interface here. I would have had to tape mine over because if I thought I needed to be doing 500 watts, but I was doing 450, I would just go exponentially slower and probably not have had a great day. So it's really, for me, and I think a lot of riders, they need to do the perceived exertion, the PE, a lot more than looking at that specific wattage in the corner.
The other problem riders have on the game is sort of overcompensating for other riders. They'll see someone coming up behind them, and all of a sudden you can't help but start pedaling faster when you feel someone behind you. It's so hard to just not, but your natural inclination is obviously to try to stay ahead of them, but sometimes you just have to tell yourself, I'm going to blow up if I go any harder than this, and so you just got to keep it in that doable range.
Especially this being stage 1 of 3 this weekend, so really easy to put all of the emphasis on the first stage when there's still a lot of racing yet to be had.
I can't forget about our final 2 days of racing here at the virtual Tour of the Gila, the Mogollon stage or a road race tomorrow, and then the course known as the Gila Monster on Sunday. Anytime it has a name like that, you know it's not an easy day of bike racing. So you guys both have 2 big days of racing coming up for both our pro men and pro women later today. That'll start at 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow for stage 2, and then same time on Sunday for stage 3 as we get back to the sort of normal racing schedule. Everyone all back together. Our Europeans, our Americans. Chris Naven saying, I'm watching you guys. Now I cannot wait to see what's on the board tomorrow for Naven, and then into Sunday. I love that he gives us a little insight into the process here. He's got some art on the wall too. I love it. Well, I think those are the original drawings. That looks like my first bike. The bottom there.
I would have to assume that Naven is not riding on the rollers and that he is on a rear wheel trainer, because if he was on the rollers, I would not suspect those framed photos to stay out very long. Those would all surely have an elbow or a shoulder or a hand through them by now if his rear wheel were not attached.
And back to Naven wrapping up his last 600 meters. You're right around 46 minutes for Chris Naven here. All right, Naven going to wrap up here. averaging right around 3.8, 3.9 watts per kilo, somewhere around there. That is a good, if you can do a whole ride at 3.9 watts per kilo, that's usually a pretty good day for most riders.
Yeah, and there are some riders who can just do that type of power forever, but they can't really go beyond that. So for a 45-minute effort, it may not amount to very much. You know, that could see you come across the line in the 45 plus range here, but those riders can sometimes keep that power going almost indefinitely. So as we get into the longer stages later on this weekend, they're going to be able to maintain that same wattage for multiple hours. And that can be a really, really interesting thing to see that doesn't always really come out during a time trial.
Yeah, when you have the group dynamics, of course, the drafting, in addition on RGT, things really change into tomorrow's road race and then into Sunday. Don't forget, you can register for the In Real Life Tour of the Gila right now. Registration just went live this week. They're offering 10% off through the end of the month if you register for the In Real Life event, April 26th through 30th in Silver City, New Mexico. We'd love to see you there. It really is one of the most unique cycling experiences that you'll do. Getting to Silver City and being there for the week of the bike race is just, it's Bike City for the week, let's say. So if you're interested in racing, they do have amateur categories as well, April 26th through 30th. Just scan that QR code right now. That'll take you right to the registration page. You can get you and your friends signed up with the early bird 10% off discount. I'm registering you and I right now, Ellen.
I'll be there.
I'm looking for the e-bike category. I don't see it. I think there might be a glitch here.
I'm emailing the promoter and asking them.
There you go.
Where our promised e-bike category is, Brad. I've actually never raced Tour of the Gila. I somehow missed it in my road days, but I have heard really, really cool things about Silver City, New Mexico. So I have to imagine that if you are lucky enough to race there, it's a very, very cool time.
It is such a cool town. Art galleries everywhere. It's just fun to hang out. We do have our men's race winner, Kevin Bouchard Hall, in our SIS Zoom room. Let's grab a word with him.
I'm here with Kevin Bouchard Hall. Congratulations on the finish. How did that feel versus your standard race?
Off. I mean, it's awful. The time trial like this long is really terrible.
I guess if anything at all, what are you looking forward to for the next few days?
I mean, I actually love the stage race. It's probably one of my favorite like e-bike races that there is, because these next two stages are really kind of fun, finishing on the big climb tomorrow, and then it's pretty punchy and hard on the last day. It's nice to go in with a lead because now I just have to follow people rather than trying to make up time. This is actually my second time doing the time trial. Today, I had a snow day here in upstate New York, and so I was home and I was like, I'll go earlier so I'll have more recovery time. And I had the gas company was doing some work on my house, and I was 10 minutes into the time trial and the power cut out. That was the end of it. So I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm not racing this weekend, because I couldn't imagine doing the time trial again. And as the hours went on, I knew there was another time. So I signed up, and I basically was like, I don't know if I'm going to finish, so I'll just go as hard as I can to start. And I got to the top of the first climb and was like, oh, you know what? I'm kind of in it now. I need to just hang on for dear life. So kind of just raced angry today, and I did much faster. I was much better pace than I was earlier today.
I mean, yeah, it sure looked like it. I guess, how are you using the Echelon Racing League to prepare for Worlds? I saw we qualified second year in a row for the men's team.
Yeah, actually, it's great training, because this racing in a lot of ways is harder. It's more sustained. It races more like a real race, in my opinion. So I'm so glad that this series is still happening, because it's the best racing that there is. It's way more like a pack and attacks and breakaways and hilltop finishes and just more interesting courses. So it's the best training that I can get, because I absolutely think that makes me much faster.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. And we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's always the gas company messing up your day. Second time trial of the day for Kevin Bouchard Hall. How about that?
Technology, and it exactly happened to Kevin Bouchard Hall out there. And it resulted in him having to do a second time trial effort, which I can't imagine anything much worse than that, if I'm being honest.
Well, that is the mindset of a champion, right? Where you think, oh, I had a snow day. A lot of people would write that one off. Bouchard Hall says, I'm going to get in for the second segment. Although I understood when he said, my day's over. No way I'm doing this one a second time. But as the day goes on, I think you kind of realize maybe I can do it. Maybe I can hang in there. So we are now just a couple minutes away from moving over to our elite women's race. Coming up next, we've got a full stable of some big riders coming up, including defending champion Jackie Godby here at the Tyrone individual time trial. We're going to take a quick break here from the Echelon Racing League, and when we come back, our elite women out on course.
Come on, move. Of course, there aren't any spots. A few minutes won't hurt anybody. Thanks, Grandma.
Paralyzed Veterans of America works tirelessly every day to create a more accessible America. Let's leave the accessible spaces to the people who actually need them. Whatever the reason, excuses don't excuse. Join PVA and be part of the solution. Honor the spot.
Welcome back. You see our elite women warming up for the individual time trial, the opening stage of the virtual tour of the Gila for this week's stop of the Echelon Racing League. Before we get started, a special welcome from our in real life race director, Jack Brennan.
Good afternoon. This is Jack Brennan. I'm the race director for the in real life tour of the Gila. Welcome to the first day of the virtual tour of the Gila. Today is our time trial course out in Tyrone, New Mexico. It's 16.15 miles long. Initial climb out of Tyrone. That's our start location, Tyrone, New Mexico. We start a climb up to a pass we call Tyrone Pass. And then it's undulating for the next couple of miles to our turnaround. And then you flip it and come right back, another 8 miles back to Tyrone. The beauty of this course is the climb up the Tyrone Pass. about 3 or 4 miles climb. You get yourself warmed up, nice descent past the Tyrone mine, flip it, come back, climb up to that path again. And then it's this pedal to the metal back home. You're dropping like a rock. You're in your top gear, and you just try to hold on to get back to the finish line.
Looking forward to seeing some of these riders in that top gear on the way down. I think we saw it with the men. They will max out. They will have a chance to rest up, but it's really all about where you use that maximum effort out on this course. And it's two places. The very beginning, where you start climbing, leaving the start house, and then after the turnaround, you're going back over that climb. So you can really peg it to these sort of 8 to 9 minute efforts, I guess, the two sort of climbing portions of this course on the out and back, the way up, the way down, and then the way back up. I think those are the two places where time is really won and lost on this course, Ellen.
Yeah, and that's kind of the strategy with time trialing, is where you have a little bit of the advantage is being able to go harder on the slower sections. So the harder that particular part of the course, the harder you should go, and that's where you're going to see the biggest payback for your efforts.
I say the best time to go is not when you're feeling good, it's when everyone else is feeling bad, which is right when things get up around the 1900 mark on this graph. It has a direct relationship to, inverse relationship maybe, to how everybody's feeling. The big climb on the way up, and then obviously the downhill on the way back. You can pick up some time there too. If it's easy to look at that downhill and say, I can just rest, but if you can go just 2 miles an hour faster by putting down wattage, well, that's going to make up a good bit of time on the way out. So we'll see how many riders max out the effort on the way down back to the finish as well. Godby underway, one of your first riders off from the start house, locked in. Look at that, a shark out there hunting time on course.
Yeah, and it looks like she's been warming up for a very long time. We saw her partner just over to her right during his race, and you could just see her Team USA shorts kind of moving in the edge of the frame. So you know that she has been warming up for this race for a very long time at this point. So she is ready to go.
Jackie Godby also being named to that ESports World Championship team. She'll be earning another one of those Team USA jerseys you see hanging behind her. Took a 6th place at the World Championships earlier this year, so she'll be looking to break inside the top 5 for the U.S. this year. Going to be a lot of competition. We've been seeing more and more national governing bodies start to take this virtual racing thing seriously, but we had one of the top teams the first few years of the UCI Esports World Championships.
Very cool to see her national champion virtual jersey on here as well.
Godby, a reigning virtual time trial national champion. She'll be back for the eSports National Championships at the end of January. And yeah, one of the cool parts about this game, letting riders race in their national champions kit, they're all about realism on RGT. They really try and get it right and make it as close to the real world as possible. One of the big things that Echelon Racing League helped implement over the last couple of years, along with the Paralyzed Veterans of America, was the addition of paracycles, hand cycles, as well as recumbents in the game. That was made a priority by RGT and Echelon Racing League. That allowed that those avatars to be created, which I learned is a lot harder than you think, because nailing the aerodynamics of a hand bike or recumbent, very, very difficult, different than an upright bike. So they had to do some wind tunnel modeling to figure out how that was going to play into the game, make sure the drafting was accurate. It was really cool to see that process of how a video game character gets made on RGT, but it's a whole lot more difficult than just drawing a new bike, that's for sure.
That's actually very cool. And yeah, it seems it's a bit more than, like you said, just drawing the bike and having that avatar there. It's being able to have them continue to have that real ride feel, as Wahoo always talks about, to really make it feel like you are riding outdoors regardless of what type of bike you're on.
Here's Aaron Ayala, 2nd place overall here in the Echelon Racing League, an exceptional group sprinter who has been dominating the non-Jackie Godby category here of the Echelon Racing League. We've been watching Godby solo away and then sort of leaving a field sprint behind her, and Ayala has been making the best of those. That puts her in second overall coming into this week of the Echelon Racing League. So Ayala testing her mettle in the individual time trial. This is, on paper, should be a good discipline for Erin Ayala, a sports psychologist. I think you need a lot of sports psychology to get through a time trial like this.
Especially a virtual time trial, no less. So definitely a lot of sports psychology on display, being able to muster the strength and motivation to complete a time trial. Especially, you can see out her window now in the dark. I think just really adds
I need a sports
to...
psychologist just to put my bibs on.
And you can see she actually printed out the profile, so right in front of her on the desk, that the profile that we were looking at ahead of the show.
Yeah, she'll be able to track where she is on that profile, obviously know what's coming up. That's interesting. You'll see a lot of riders printed out, and we talked about taping it to the stem or the top two, but I guess one of the advantages of virtual racing, you can kind of spread out in your home office here. It's like the bike racing equivalent of dual monitors. There's a look at the profile. I think that's her head unit there as well. So that would allow her to track the distance. She could cross-reference that on the map. This is the best prepared time trialist I've seen yet.
This is pretty prepared. You can see she has some sort of drink mix in her bottles as well, which is going to be important even on a race as short as 40 minutes and change. Having that fueling, especially with two bigger stages tomorrow, taking down a good bit of carbohydrates tonight, is going to be helpful in today's race, but even more helpful as we prepare for two bigger stages this weekend.
Ayala had that desk custom made. It's the perfect trainer height for virtual racing, believe it or not. That's dedication to the craft right there. Back to Bronwyn McGregor, another good sprinter on that Velocity Vixen team, teammates of Erin Ayala. On camera with McGregor. Looks like she's somewhere warm. I don't see a lot of snow on the trees outside.
That's going to come with an entirely different set of challenges. Calling back to what we talked about earlier, trying to keep that external temperature right around 55 to 56 degrees. If you're somewhere warm right now, trying to keep the temp as low as possible is a very, very big challenge. You can't just open a window or hop out onto your porch.
Pretty much peak heat right now in New Zealand. Let's see, it would be 1337 in Auckland right now. I'm not sure where in New Zealand she is, but pretty close to the hottest part of the day. I love the internet. Just under 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees centigrade in Auckland today. So pretty cool day over there. Looking to see if any riders stick together out here. Remember, they do start at 15-second intervals, so they've obviously separated out pretty well right now. Godby has gotten herself just under 900 meters ahead of Ayala. Godby with the high desk as well. Got to get that camera up to eye level. Looks like Godby running compression socks as well. I see. I guess you can take the rider out of triathletes, but you can't take the triathletes out of the rider. Although, you know, one of the beautiful things about virtual racing, there's so much that we still don't know about the physiology of this whole thing, the strategy of racing. There's so much research to be done on this specific type of riding. Before, all of the research studies, we would say, well, that was in a lab, that was on a trainer, that's not like in real life. But now we're kind of saying, well, it's different when you're in the lab or on the trainer. So this may be advantageous. I would guess someone with a dual MD PhD would know a little better about the effect of compression socks on legs than a guy who got a bachelor's of journalism.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super great point. Like you said, understanding, you know, just sort of what benefits there may be riding indoors versus what benefits we would have riding outdoors, and what things don't really matter as much. I also know, you know, Jackie Godby was talking on Instagram about being diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis, which can be a really serious situation, especially for a lot of cyclists. So I would wonder if maybe some of her preparation today is around sort of, you know, mitigating that situation. And, you know, it'd be really curious to hear, like we were talking about, as a MD and PhD recipient, you know, how she sort of uses that to her advantage in, you know, handling that diagnosis.
Got to keep that blood flowing, keep it moving. I think that's a new addition for her. I don't know that we've seen the compression socks in previous seasons, so obviously working for Godby out there. She's having a good day today, averaging just under 5 watts per kilo right now. You see a little blip in that power profile, just a little up and down there, making its way off the screen right now. But other than that, Godby rock solid. Back to a pass on course. Looks like Bronwyn McGregor catching her 15-second woman. So Sheveskiev going to go back into second as Bronwyn McGregor moves ahead. Now, they do have light drafting in a TT setup like this, so it doesn't, there's a slight benefit to sitting on a rider when you catch, but it is minimized in the time trial, especially when we start riders at 15-second intervals. That's why in the real life races, they'll start them at 30 seconds or maybe even a minute, because they don't want riders to catch. You don't want that drafting to affect the riding. So we allow them to start at 15-second intervals in the Echelon Racing League, but in exchange for that, they do turn off some of the drafting features in the time trial day. So it doesn't really do you much good to find a rider and try and sit on them, which is part of why we're able to put riders out there at such short intervals. I have to imagine that changes the mental side of racing, though, Ellen. There's one thing to catching a minute woman up the road and watching that gap slowly come down, but you may see 2 or 3 riders in front of you with 15-second intervals. That's some riders need that carrot to sort of chase whatever's in front of them. I'm not sure if that would help or hurt you. I guess that's personal preference.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the idea of just riding your own race. So it can be really easy to get caught up on whether you're going to catch a couple of people or whether you're being caught. But at the end of the day, all you can do is just really focus on your own efforts. And if you're having a good day or a bad day, you still just have to get across the line and make it to the other stages. And those can be totally, totally different outcomes. So if it's super motivating to you, then that's awesome. And using that to your advantage is great. But if it's something that makes you nervous and may slow you down, then that's when you really just have to not look at the screen and just put your head down and pedal.
Back to Erin Ayala. See some of her in real life accolades in the background as well. I recognize those 2 Tour of America's Dairyland trophies up in Wisconsin. just over her back. Got some of her in real life numbers pinned up as well. And maybe a workout written on the whiteboard for Aaron, too. I got to give me one of these whiteboards. All the fastest people all seem to have them.
I think in order to read that whiteboard, we would need the sort of zoom settings that they have on Criminal Minds, where it just keeps getting clearer and clearer the more that they zoom in. But
yeah, for
safe
some
to
reason
assume.
we don't have the CSI technology here. Enhance, enhance, enhance. Isla nice and steady up here. Now you see Ayala right in the middle of her sort of power zone. She was in the yellow to orange zone. Godby on a 5% downhill. So she's working her way down the backside of this first climb of the day. So she can let off the power a little bit. You see on the steepest section, she was able to completely let off there. But she has lowered her average power significantly. She'll be maxed out on speed on the way down right now.
Yeah, and for a rider like Jackie Godby, if you are maxing out your gears and you're sort of struggling to go any faster, then that's a great time to just sort of let that rest come and not try to fight it. So if she's already sort of maxed out her gears, this is a perfect little bit built-in piece of recovery. And sometimes taking that just little bit of time to pedal easier will pay dividends going forward.
Nice to see some Aaron Ayala fans in the chat on Facebook. Hello to everybody watching and cheering on Aaron. Doing a great job out there up against not only one of the best in the country, one of the best in the world. Jackie Godby is a serious world-class contender, and Aaron Ayala has been going head-to-head with her every weekend here in the Echelon Racing League. So very impressive ride for really anyone that can even come close to hanging with Godby on a course like this. Going a little further back to McMaster. Averaging right around 4 watts per kilo here with just under 20K left for the Canadian. Let's look at her.
McMaster with the sort of sweatband that you would expect everyone in this type of race.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't see more sweatbands.
Not only is it practical, it's also a major fashion statement. And, you know, I'm just sort of surprised that riders don't need them and or really want them. But I can only imagine how much sweat so many of these athletes get into their eyes over the course of even just a 40-minute time trial.
It's a big one. It's got a serious sweatband going on here. I think that'll be the next piece of cycling clothing that we see gracing the shelves into 23, 24, the trainer-specific headband. I'm sure the good folks at all of the marketing departments will come up with some headband that we need that does something better than a normal headband for cycling. Aerodynamic headband, maybe. How about that?
It's going to turn blue when it's sweated in.
Mood band. There you go.
Oh, that's interesting. It's going to be able to read your sweat and tell you just how hard you're going in case we needed more data.
Yeah,
to tell us that
exactly.
we're going
You can
hard.
see almost an overload. If you look at this dashboard that the riders look at, I mean, you are pretty much constantly bombarded with data. But the best riders really understand how to use that, and they've leaned into that. Like riders like Kevin Bouchard-Hall, they're going back to look at the data after this one. How can I get better? How can my power profile improve? What did I do good? What can I do better heading into tomorrow or Sunday? Things like that. So while it can seem overwhelming, especially for people that I guess got their start maybe in real life world where racing on feel and things like that are so well regarded. It's a really different style of racing, but we're seeing a new breed of racer really taking to this virtual racing style.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And like you were saying, this type of data so helpful. And I think it's something that's a lot better retroactively. So it's really overwhelming when you're out there racing, but it's something that can be really helpful if you go back and look at it after the race is done. But when you're out there in your mid-effort, like we're seeing with Jackie Godby right now, all she really needs to know is, am I pedaling at as hard as I can go to maintain it to the finish line? And if the answer is yes, then she doesn't need any more information than that.
Being able to see this data really only came about in the last 10, maybe 15 years, kind of made it into the mainstream where power meters were truly accessible for the average person. It used to be, back in the day, it was so expensive to be able to pull this power data off of a wheel. You had to have all this special hardware. You had to have a special computer that went on the bike. It was reserved for only the most elite of elite athletes. And now I'm looking at 20 people all over the world measuring their power all at the same time. It's incredible how far that technology has come, and obviously opening up that training tool to more amateurs as well. But Ellen, I think it's probably easy to get lost in this data. We also want to remind people that you got to have fun riding your bike too. It's not all about turning out the big numbers.
No, it's definitely not. And sometimes having fun is what allows you to turn out those big numbers. It's a lot of these riders are able to do this as a result of many, many years of hard work and focus. It's not something that really just happens overnight or by accident.
Jackie Godby always has a smile on her face, probably because she always wins the bike race when we talk to her, but she also has this way of enjoying the experience, looking forward to the chocolate afterwards, like you talked about, figuring out how to make it a positive experience for her as opposed to just suffering that seems to make its way into so much cycling branding these days.
Yes, Jackie Godby was one of the few riders that I was able to take a peek at on Instagram before today's start, and it felt like chocolate was mentioned in just about every one of her posts, at least any cycling related posts. So it feels like she's one of the riders who's really tapped into having one of those, a bit of a carrot, if you will. So we've talked a bit already just how tough it must be to motivate to get on your bike in the basement, put that chamois on, and then face down just a massive effort like this. But Jackie Godby always has a big reward on the other side, and it just makes it seem a lot more, I guess, enjoyable when all is said and done.
I don't know how Godby finds the time to participate in these. As a medical resident, if you're familiar with that life at all, you know how stressful it is, how little time you have to yourself. But she's obviously using that precious free time for endeavors like this, the virtual tour of the Gila, part of the Echelon Racing League. Godby with her first split in at just over 22 minutes at the turnaround. She will definitely be faster on the second half of this. I'm expecting to see a time well under 44 for Godby, so I would expect to see her second half number come down here.
Yeah, and last time we saw her on camera, she just looked really, really composed, especially early on in this effort. It didn't look like she went out as hard as she could have from the start of this race. So I think that we can expect to see her really just continue to ramp up that power as she goes on. A bit of a negative split like we've talked about in other races. So hoping to get faster as the race goes on is really one of the best tactics that you can hope for. And I have a feeling a racer as experienced as Jackie Godby is going to be able to do that and then some.
Good question in the chat about the riders participating. Elizabeth asking, are these racers possible Olympic contenders? Absolutely. They would race probably in the time trial discipline in the Olympics, but in the next few cycles, we may see virtual racing make its way into the Olympics. You just never know. Crazier sports have made it in. Crazier things have happened. So I would not be surprised to see our first virtual Olympic champion in the next couple cycles. But more immediately, yes, we do see some riders that are trying to make runs at the Olympic team in the in real life world. It is really tough as a cyclist, Ellen, because one, the financial part of it, trying to make a living as an Olympic cyclist is really tough to do. So most riders end up on what's called a trade team, and that pays their bills. Those are people with the sponsored jerseys. You're sort of doing that to pay the bills most of the year. And then when you get into the Olympic cycle, you sort of test the waters and see if you have a chance, and then you kind of work your way through the process from there. But it's a long road to make it onto the Olympic team. So there will be some riders looking to sort of get that notice, sort of get themselves noticed, but this would be the place that you do it. There are absolutely people watching these broadcasts looking for that next breakout rider. And if you come on here and average 8,000 watts per kilogram for an hour, you're going to get a call from the U.S. Olympic training team, and they're going to say, how would you like to come out to Colorado Springs and do a little bit of testing? You can come out to our lab, you can ride on our track, and they'll really give you everything you need to see if these riders have the potential to be an Olympic talent. But this would be more of a pipeline part of the Olympic program right now.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. This is part of the pipeline. It's maybe an indirect way to grab that attention and get recruited, but it's not a direct way to make it onto the Olympic team. So a rider like Jackie Godby definitely could be, maybe already has been for all we know. Really hard to say. Getting recruited or starting those conversations with the U.S. national team, and sometimes these performances can really grab the attention of those recruiters. And I think especially the U.S. Olympic track team typically brings riders in from outside of the sport of track racing. So a rider like Emma White, and I believe Ruby West, who's Canadian, both of those riders getting recruited from the sport of cyclocross onto the track, sort of brought in as the ringers for the Olympic track team.
We should also point out that we have one of the best women's Olympic track programs in the world, consistently medal winners at World Championships and Olympics. Really one of the most consistent programs out there, really any sport. But our women's track program is really the feather in America's cap, our most consistent medal earners year in and year out.
Yeah, and when you look at the effort that is placed on that team and the fact that a lot of those riders are living at the Olympic Training Center full time, it's no surprise that they are sort of, like you said, the feather in the US's cap at the World Championships and at the Olympics, because there's just so much more development that goes into that program than some of the other programs at the moment.
There's a whole what's called the OTC, the Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs, where those riders will go live and train. They have a velodrome that they can use pretty much any time, gym, all that stuff, access to the best experts, sports physiologists, psychologists, nutritionists, dietitians, all that stuff that goes into being a high-level athlete. Certainly needs to see it pay every few years when we bring home a medal at the Olympics or World Championships. Got one of the best in the world racing what's called the Track Champions League out there right now. There's a woman by the name of Jennifer Valente, a multi-time Olympic medalist who has been dominating this new league over in Europe called the Track Champions League. She races on the endurance side of things, just won her second season of that as the top endurance athlete in the world. So got a lot to be proud of in the United States. Back to McMaster, still waiting to make it through her intermediate split. We do see some more coming in. Ayala did a 24:16. Bronwyn McGregor a little further behind her with a 25:02 intermediate split, but Jackie Godby still the fastest at the turnaround, just over 22 minutes in here.
Really just goes to speak to Jackie Godby's sort of domination in this type of race, especially in this type of effort. 2-minute gap, 2 minutes and 5 seconds actually at the intermediate split. So you always expect that gap to continue to go out in the second half of this race, unless a rider like Aaron or Brown McGregor is better in the second half. Maybe that gap won't get quite as big, but 2 minutes and 5 seconds at the intermediate split time is pretty substantial.
The out and back courses are so tough too, because you see your competitors coming the other way. You know that they hit that turnaround. You know how far you have to the turnaround. You start doing that math in your head and thinking, they're already on their way back. I'm still 2 kilometers from the turnaround. That means they're 4 kilometers ahead of me. You can see the distance on the left side of the screen. Jackie Godby just over 4K ahead of Aaron Ayala right now. Or 4K ahead of McMaster, sorry, who we're following in this group. Nice and steady on a 1% gradient. Ellen, sometimes this is the worst type of road to ride on. They call this a false flat, just 1%. This is where you start to think you might have a flat rear tire. I think anyone who's ever ridden knows that feeling where you're like, it just feels like I'm riding in space.
Yeah, it's where you start to think, especially back in the days of cantilever brakes, that maybe is my brake rubbing? Did I bump my caliper by accident? And, you know, now my wheel is rubbing, I guess, in real life racing, or maybe on the virtual racing, you're starting to wonder if the belt drive has gone a little bit off, because you're wondering how it's possible for a flat road to feel so brutal.
Especially in Silver City, you have these long open stretches. There is some ups and downs where you lose sight of the road ahead of you, but that part in the middle, you're kind of looking at this 2 miles of road ahead of you, and it just looks flat, barren, desolate, but there's actually a tiny uphill kick on the way back, which we saw Godby on. She's onto the steeper part right now, coming up on a 5% gradient on the way up. Now, 5% would be a visible gradient. If you're not familiar with gradients, like, I guess the steepest road that you would ever see, the steepest part of a road usually comes on a switchback. And that would usually be like maybe 15 to 17%, somewhere in there would be like the maximum gradient that you would see on a road. Some people claim it goes to like 18 or 20. Some of those roads in San Francisco claim to have 20+% gradients, but for the most part, you can think about the steepest road that you've ever been on. You can think about the switchbacks, and those switchbacks are probably, let's say, a 17% gradient. So 5%, pretty steady. That's enough that you're not quite standing steady when you're on the side of the road there.
So Brad, I had to look it up because I was looking for a visual reference of what these gradients look like. And it looks like potentially, or purportedly, as the article puts it, there are 2 of the steepest streets in San Francisco tying at 31.5% grade.
Okay. So that means for every 100 feet you go forward, you're going up just over 30 feet. You have a hard time getting a bike up and over that.
It is very alarming to see a 30% grade with cars parked on them, because it looks like the cars could actually just start to roll over. So if none of our previous visuals have helped, just think about a car looking like it's just about to tip over if it's parked perpendicular to a 30% grade.
And then think about riding your bike up that for about a 12-minute effort to get to the top of it. We're not quite doing a 30% gradient on the way up, but let's give you an idea of sort of what the maximum gradient you would see is, and that can help you kind of slot in. The maximum on this course is 8%. So the steepest part of this course kicks off right around 8%, but that is enough to make you look backwards on the bike a little bit. One of the really fun parts of RGT, these riders racing on the virtual version of the real-life course that they use. The Tour de Gila is a 5-day stage race out in Silver City, New Mexico every year. We're using 3 of those courses for the virtual version. On RGT, riders can put in any course that they want. If you can generate what's called a GPX file, you can either draw it online or you can use an old ride file. If you had a favorite ride that you did on vacation, something like that, those riders can then load those courses into the game and it will create that virtual world for them. So when we talk about trying to ride a 30% gradient, you could punch that route into this game on RGT and then feel what it's like to try and ride up the 30+% gradients in San Francisco. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but if you wanted to, you could.
If that's your idea of fun, we are not going to be the ones to stop you.
I think that would break the new pieces of hardware. We talked about some of the innovations that we've been seeing with the riders. One of the first big innovations was the variable fan. So as riders were going faster or going down the hill, the fan would start to blow more air on the riders, made it more realistic. Now they have these risers where the riders will hook their front fork up to this thing that goes up and down, basically. And as you go up a hill, it's going to lift your front wheel. As you go down a hill, it's going to drop your front wheel. And it gives you this feeling of actually being on the incline. So I don't know if that can do 30%. I think you might have to do some custom 3D printing to get that thing up to 30%.
Yeah, you might start looping out, or at least getting into the 12 o'clock boys territory at that point. But it is actually really, really interesting technology to see those type of kicker climb type technology, because it does recruit a different muscle pattern when you are climbing versus when you're riding flat. So being able to train those muscles a little bit is, really, really impactful on the trainer, and especially, considering the old technology where you would just put a bunch of books or even a stool under your front wheel and then you just have to ride in that position the entire time. Having that undulation as you ride, mimicking a real course is, just a very, very impressive bit of technology.
Godby at 3.25 kilometers to go now. Enjoying the last bit of downhill before things flatten out on the way back to the line. Looks like Ayala will be the next rider in. Having a great ride today. I'm watching her average wattage, doing a really good job, keeping that right around 4 watts, nice and steady. I think this will be a good time for Erin Ayala out there today.
Not surprised to see that Erin Ayala is a little bit more of, or has been a very successful field sprinter so far this year. You can see, looking at her power profile, it's a little bit more undulating than that of Jackie Godby's or some of our other riders that we've been looking at so far today. So Erin Ayala with a little bit more of that variable power, which will lend itself to sprinting, might make it a little bit harder to set it and forget it, if you will, out here during today's time trial, but it's not a disadvantage. It's really just finding out where to use those strengths.
Erin Ayala, no stranger to those short, fast, tough efforts. Cyclocross, one of her favorite disciplines, no surprise. Translates pretty well to these hour and a half long virtual efforts. A lot of on and off in cyclocross racing. This one a little more steady, especially in the time trial, but that ability to harness a lot of power very quickly would translate well for someone like Erin Ayala.
Definitely, and that's we were looking earlier. We were kind of spying earlier on her pain cave, seeing those Tour of America's Dairylands trophies. Those are the type of races that really, really reward a rider that has that variable power.
Godby just under 2K now to the line. See if she can keep it under 40 out there today. Fast times earlier today were right around 42 in the morning session. I think Godby should be well under that. And you also got to remember, still 2 more days of racing here. Godby does want to give herself a nice lead, but the race isn't won on the first day. And you got to make sure that you make it through the last 2 days first. So there is an element of making sure that she goes just hard enough, but not too hard on the first of a 3-day stage race.
Exactly, especially if she plays her cards right. This could be a really, really good opener to sort of ensure that really sort of fresh and springy leg feeling that could come for the next 2 days. But it is easy to put yourself a little bit too deep into the box. Looks like she has just a few hundred meters left. I think she paced this one really, really intelligently. You can see her power profile just sort of eking up. We were talking a bit about a false flat. That is definitely more than a false flat on her power profile, but you can see that she's just starting to really, really ramp up that effort as the finish line is starting to draw closer.
And this is emptying the last bits in the tank as you see her ratchet that power up into the red zone for the last 500 meters of racing to the line. Godby going to stop the clock just under 41. She will go a 40-46, we'll call it, for Jackie Godby. Happy with that ride. We'll post-ride celebration fist pump. And now immediately log the power, save again. These riders do have dual recording as a part of the Echelon Racing League verification program, so they have to save 2 different power files for each ride. So Godby finishing up her day. Still a few riders to make their way in. While we've got time here, we were talking earlier about some of the innovations in technology, some of the different things that Wahoo bringing to the game. We're also seeing the trainers get more and more realistic, including a little bit of movement underneath. I know someone who you've worked with a lot in your career, a guy by the name of Alan Lim, got together with our friends at Saris and talked about some things that they've been developing to make riding on a trainer just a little more realistic.
My name is Dr. Alan Lim. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I've spent most of my career working with professional cyclists. For years, I've been getting riders to ride on static trainers that don't move. But now, with the Infinity technology by Saris on the MP1 platform, you have fore-aft movement as well as side-to-side movement that ultimately greatly enhances comfort. Every single contact point can move in a more natural way, and over the long haul, what that means is you don't get beat up by your static trainer. With just that little bit of motion, you start to replicate what you feel in the outdoors, and that changes the entire experience. I think that one of the big reasons for that is that we're naturally tuned to want to move. Our vestibular system, when it's activated, ends up, creating, I think, a sense of harmony or joy that just isn't the same when you're not able to move. It's like the difference between a rocking chair versus a static chair. And a lot of it, I think, is about expectation, because when you get it on a bicycle, you expect it to move. And so when you get on the MP1 platform with the Infinity technology, you get that same level of movement. 6 degrees side to side, 9.5 inches fore and aft. And And what that does is it creates an experience that is just so much more enjoyable, so much more fun than being on a static trainer. When you look at the design of the MP1 platform, it's not just designed for the H3 trainer by Ceres. It's also designed to be compatible with almost every new smart trainer currently on the market. So if you don't own the H3, but you have your own trainer at home, odds are this will be compatible with the MP1. Another unique feature of the Infinity technology on the Ceres MP1 platform is that it's best in class. You have 6 degrees of side-to-side motion and 9.5 inches of fore-aft motion. That's movement that specifically replicates what you feel outdoors, and there's no other competitor on the market that can simulate that type of movement. It's certainly not the kind of movement that you can get by just putting tennis balls under your trainer. You know, cycling isn't just about your legs and your lungs. It's also about being able to handle the bicycle, and that takes a lot of control in both your core as well as all of these small stabilizer muscles. On an indoor trainer that is static, you're just not getting any of that specificity. But with the Infinity technology built into the MP1 platform, you are able to use and have to use all of those stabilizers to control the bicycle. The net effect is that not only do you get a workout for your legs and your lungs, but you also get a workout for your core. The Infinity technology built into the MP1 platform creates the best-in-class movement for any trainer system. You've got 6 degrees of side-to-side movement, 9.5 inches of fore-aft movement, and the net result is way more comfort, way more fun, the ability to use your core or stabilizer muscles, and you've got a platform that is compatible with most trainers.
Welcome back. Erin Ayala making her way in on the Tour of the Gila time trial day, just finishing up her 16-mile ride. She's going to do that in just under 45 minutes. That'll be a 44:52 for Erin Ayala. She's going to be happy with that ride today. That is a good one. Steady on the way back. Obviously left it all out there. This is how you want to end a time trial, Ellen.
Brad, the way that I would like to end a time trial is by not starting one, but for Erin Ayala, it looks like a really great effort out there, and yeah, for sure a really good warm-up for tomorrow's stage.
I guess the only better way to end a time trial is at an ice cream shop or coffee shop or something, whatever you're into. Bar, maybe, depending on how your ride went. Out to Bronwyn McGregor up next at 4 watts per kilo right now, working her way through the last half kilometer of the ride. This will be a good time for her, too. Going to try and keep it under 46 minutes. Ayala did just over 44. Godby's time, a 40:46. And I think this one going to stay under 46 for McGregor.
McGregor with some in real life fans cheering her on.
Getting into it. Now, this is another thing where there is verifiable scientific evidence that having someone there cheering you on makes you go harder. You can do better. You can do numbers that you can't do alone when you've got someone in the room cheering for you. This has been verified time and time again. There's just something about us humans that makes us a little bit faster when we got some encouragement.
Absolutely, and it looks like it did a great job for McGregor. You could see at the end her power profile just trending upwards and upwards.
McGregor with the time trial bike as well. Back to Anish Veskeyev. Veskeyev with just over a kilometer left now. Now this power profile you see in the upper left corner, a little more ups and downs on, so this would be a good chance for a big spike at the end for Anna. All right, inside 500 meters now. This one's going to go probably just under 49 minutes for Anna Shviskayev. Be one of our final riders in for the individual time trial here. It doesn't look like anyone going to knock down Jackie Godby's 40:46 time set earlier today. But remember, this is based on individual time, so riders going to be looking for every second that they can get on the time trial. The overall Tour of the Gila is scored based on your total time. They add up the time it takes for the time trial, the time it takes for Saturday's road race, and the time it takes for Sunday's road race. So every second that you make up or give up here on the time trial, you may be looking for that or giving it back with the next two stages. So even though you're all alone out here on the road, every second matters. So looks like McMaster going to be, I think, our final rider out on course for our wave of pro women. McMaster, let's see, trying to crack a top 10 here. It's going to be pretty close to staying inside the top 10. With a big effort here in the last 700 meters, she'll be able to roll into 9th or 10th here. A 51.06 or under, I think, be enough to get her into the top 10. Looking at some of the earlier times from today. Get her into 9th. So, yeah, I think she's going to be good inside the top 10 because the next time there is a 52.27. So, this will be a top 10 ride for McMaster today. She can be happy with that. And we'll keep our eye on her heading into stages 2 tomorrow and stage 3 on Sunday of the virtual Tour of the Gila. But sounds like everybody going to be chasing Jackie Godby in that virtual leader's jersey, as has been the story for most of the season so far this year, and certainly last year at the virtual Tour of the Gila as well. So McMaster into the finishing chute. She will end the day at 51, we'll call it 24, and that'll be good for a 10th place ride for McMaster. All right, all riders are in. Let's go into the SIS Zoom room and grab a word with our winner today. Once again, it's Jackie Godby.
I'm here now with Jackie Godby. Job well done. How did this feel compared to last year?
I mean, I blocked last year out of my memory, so I was ready to step up to the race again. I mean, quite honestly, every year, every time trial you do is going to hurt. It's going to take you to that deep sort of black pit of your soul where it's only you and whatever you can put on the line. And that's what I brought here today. So another great, very long, very painful TT. A lot of just seeing what I could bring to the table and what I could bring to those hills. And it was rough. Oh my goodness, that was tough.
Yeah, I guess if anything what are you looking forward to for the next few days with us the stage?
I mean, I really love Tour of the Gila. I really love the longer stage races. I think that's something unique to RGT. You know, with my background in sort of triathlon, endurance racing, I know it sounds crazy to say, but I really love these longer, these hour and a half, these 2 hour races. where you can settle in, you know, and you have these horrible, difficult climbs you can really sink your teeth into. But then you also have these beautiful long flat stretches. You have these downhills where you can sit up and you can really enjoy the ride, so to speak. You can enjoy the endorphins of the race. And I think that's a lot of fun, especially because when you get off at the end, you feel a huge sense of accomplishment. And then, you know, you can go have brunch for me, and then I can go sort of relive the race with John, who also will be doing the same thing this weekend.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Job well done again. And good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Gotta be looking forward to another great virtual tour of the Gila. Interesting to hear that even she tries to block out time trials sometimes, but no surprise there. She just has that way of suffering. So there are your final times. Jackie Godby with a 40.46, your winning time on the day. Erin Ayala going to go second with a 44.52. She can be pumped on that one. And then the beast mode presented by Rose Team going 3 and 4 with the Germans. Kim Miller taking third place and Julia Klein just a little slower than her at a 45.51. So that wraps up our Tyrone individual time trial today, presented by visitsilvercity.com. That's going to get us ready for our second day of racing at 10 a.m. tomorrow for the Mogollon Stage Race, one of our favorite days of racing. So for Ellen Noble, my name is Brad Soner saying thanks for watching the virtual tour of the Gila Stage 1. We'll see you back here at 10 a.m. Eastern for Stage 2 tomorrow.